If you do that, you have to wait.
Well, Black Friday's coming up.
Steam usually has like a winter sale.
You guys want to get started and get to the showing of office stuff real quick? I don't even know if it's worth talking about this stuff. It's just kind of like some closing thoughts for the class, so we'll just get them out of the way, and then we'll jump to more fun stuff. So basically, this is picking up from last time. This is talking about some final design considerations as we continue forward in our own journeys. That your games have an impact on the people who play them. And the first way I want to look at games is good or societal good. And I think we've talked, or at least you've probably thought about this, is games allow you to vent anger and frustration and can help cheer you up at times. Games are continually being looked at maybe as forms of therapy. And it's just basically games can be like problem solving too. And that's why they're used for education sometimes, or at least people have tried to use that. I think we all probably have this idea that educational games are notoriously bad. And I kind of want to bring up 4 considerations for why they're bad. And first of all is when you're trying to teach something, you may only have a fixed period of time. We only have an hour in this class. And people play games at a variable pace. They want to play games however they want. So some people will speed rush through a game. Gone Home, for example. They'll play Gone Home in 30 minutes, and they're like, this game sucks. Other people will spend 2 hours playing Gone Home, looking at everything in the house and trying to figure out the entire world. So that applies to games as education because it's interactive and the player decides the pace. So that's why it's kind of tough there. The other thing is the year 1965. This is actually a note from Jesse Schell, and basically that 1965 is a year, and people born before this time did not have video games as part of their lives, pretty much, growing up. And because of that, these are also people in an age bracket who are making big decisions about education in the world, and in particular the United States. And that means that they don't really see the value of games in education. So there's never really a strong push for that envelope to be pressed. And the last thing is it's hard to make. It's hard to make something that's engaging and also fun for learning purposes. And you would need 12 lessons for maybe actually 24 lessons, right, for a semester-long class. If you're gonna do a game for every lesson in your class. So yeah, it's just kind of tough. The last thing I want to look at games, and I think everybody has heard this story before, so I'm not going to get too far into it, but games can be a little detrimental at times. There's been a long discussion about games, violence in games, and other material that's not appropriate for kids. I think that's really something that goes down to parents, and that's a discussion that is still ongoing. The last is games do have a quality to make you want to continue to play them, right? We talked about flow. And that can kind of transform into addiction. And the thing is, addictive personalities attract themselves to a number of things, and video games are sometimes that thing. So games do transform their players. And as a designer, do you really need to be responsible for this? Where do you come into play here? And basically, for me, I think it's kind of who do you want to be responsible for that ethics call when it comes down to it. If somebody if you find out you've been working on this crazy cool Farmville 2.0 and millions of people are playing it, everybody's going broke, your company is becoming absurdly rich, does it go to you? How do you feel if you created the farming system that did that? So just something to think about, that you do have a little bit of maybe responsibility. This is a quote from Mr. Rogers. You can read it, but basically, he hated television so much that he got into it to help nurture kids. And I think that's an important way to understand that, really, the medium is the message, and that's another idea that's talked about a lot in media studies. But basically, that what the content does to a culture is more important than what the content actually is. So, just keeping in mind that as a designer, you do have an impact, even though when you start off, you might be a little bit obscure. When you're starting off as an entry-level designer in a studio, your name's probably not going to be on the box, right? So even then, games are getting a lot more mainstream, and so being a game designer is a lot more visible than it used to be, right? Game designers at studios have thousands of Twitter followers. There's a way for you to be known, and your responsibility still carries on through that. And this kind of just goes into accountability. So basically it kind of falls on you, and that everything you design will have an impact on someone. So this is something that's like hyper focused, and like probably won't happen for a long time, I think, unless you have a lot of people playing your games. But just keep it in mind that once you make something, it is out in the wild. Like it takes a life of its own, and once you've made a game, you can't really unmake it, so to say. So once people played it, it's out there. So in case any of you guys ever become indie one-hit wonders, this is something you'll have to think about someday. But this is a secret. So um, you might want to consider designing your games with the understanding that they're not just amusement but a range of experiences, and that life itself is made of experiences. So we create fantasy worlds for people to do what they secretly wish they could do in real life. And kind of going back to what I talked about with 1965, the medium that you engage with most when you're a kid is kind of how you perceive the world. That's how you think about things. So there was like the television generation that happened like in the 80s and 70s, and we're in a generation that had interactive media kind of as one of our most used pastimes growing up, right? And also television too. But just keep this in mind, like as we make games, we're impacting the thought process of kids that will be the next generation, which is pretty exciting. So at the very beginning of class, we talked about being able to listen, and that's pretty much what's core about being a game designer. And so you have to listen to yourself most of all. And the raven is a symbol in one of Poe's poems of the same name. So pretty much the thing is, life is short and time creeps up quickly. So just be honest with yourself when you ask this question, if it's worth your time making a certain game. And the last thing is your purpose. And it kind of goes in hand with the question before. And how do you know that something is important before it's done or not, right? How do you know that this game isn't going to be like the next indie hit or what have you? And that's just something you have to listen to for yourself. And that kind of comes down to finding your purpose. And everyone here that's a designer has a purpose. It's hidden inside somewhere. And maybe it's because you have some vision that you want to share with the world, like some really strong artistic vision. And no one can really figure out this purpose except you, and no one really needs to know it except you too. That's the other trick. And figure it out really soon, because when you do, you'll find kind of your true motivation for game development, and also just your life. And your creative intensity will surge to levels over 9,000. So, until next time, thanks for being part of class.